Ah, Pokemon, everyone's favorite creature collecting hobby. Sorry, taxidermists. The franchise took the world by storm in the late 90s, but has since become a bit stale. Still, fans continue to play every new installment hoping that maybe this will be the one that recaptures the magic of the classic games while simultaneously modernizing the franchise. Many of us expected Legends Arceus, released earlier this year, to be that, a Breath of the Wild inspired Pokemon game. It was not, but now we have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, games that promise to be that true next step for the franchise. And so I'm going to compare these new installments to the classics to see if the new games are able to push the franchise forward while still being faithful to what made the originals so beloved. And before we start, I'm going to go very light on spoilers. I'll be covering gameplay mechanics, showcasing some new Pokemon and gym leaders, but I won't be diving into the story beyond the first few hours. Okay, let's get started, and just like the old games, we start with the protagonist in their bedroom. It's nice to see Nintendo carry over the trope of having their current games console connected to the TV. And just like the originals, the interiors seem to be surrounded by this black void. I get why, but now it kind of looks like he's living inside a giant dollhouse. The protagonist is still raised by a single mother. The main difference this time is instead of kicking you out at the ripe old age of 10, she informs you that you're about to start your first day at the Pokemon Academy. So the school director arrives and proceeds to have tea with your mother. Looks like he's channeling old Professor Oak there. Now, unlike the old games, you don't actually get to pick your starter straight away, and for a second I thought that you could actually try them out in battle before making the choice. But no, they just walk by your side for a little while as you make your way to the house at the top of the hill. And straight away you can tell this game suffers from the same popping issues as Legends Arceus. But more on that later. So at the end of the street you get introduced to your rival. Well, kind of. She's part rival, part mentor, part fellow student. You know, I miss the days when rivals were downright criminals. Of course, being a firm believer in water-type supremacy, I'm going to go with old Donald Duck here. And let me guess, the rival's gonna choose a grass type. Nope, fire. Isn't this girl supposed to be like a star student? And this is followed by your first battle, and just like Legends Arceus, the battle takes place in the open world. Only this time the trainer is stationary. That's probably for the best, it stops him running into the way of the hydro pump. Time to catch my first Pokemon. Ah, that's one ugly looking Pidgey. And we're definitely going back to basics here. No minigame based catching from the Let's Go games, and none of the open world based catching from the Arceus game. It's almost the same as the original. Of course, over the past couple of games, the random encounters have been replaced with Pokemon actually running around in the wild. The town map has finally been updated to include a minimap in the corner. The Pokédex is pretty much the same, only this time in the theme of a bookshelf, and for some reason all the items you find in the wild are still represented by Pokeballs. That Psyduck's looking a bit shifty. Is he gonna charge me a toll to cross the bridge? The wild Pokemon aren't the only ones who get to stroll around. Remember walking Pokemon? This feature was first introduced in Pokemon Yellow. Now back then it only applied to Pikachu, who for some reason was the same size as the trainer. Absolute unit. Of course, this feature was expanded in Generation 4 and has been prominent in the past couple of games. It's back here, however, this time your main can run ahead and auto-battle wild Pokemon. Look at little Donald Duck just running around starting on everyone. How about the Psyduck just chilling in the pond and suddenly BAM! It turns into a world-star hip-hop video. And what about the NPC characters? Well, remember how in the classic games you could pretty much talk to anyone? Well, the people in the Paldea region seem to keep to themselves. Also, you can no longer break into people's homes and announced like before. In fact, you can hardly walk into any buildings in this game. There are a ton of different shops, but they all just consist of menus. As for the trainers, they're still around in the wild areas, but the game no longer forces you to battle them to get past. Hold on, who the hell is that guy? Pascal the student. More like Pascal the branch manager who had a midlife crisis and ended up going back to college. And so we arrive at the capital, also known as Pop City. I mean, it looks really nice, but the popping and frame rate is extra rough in these built up areas. Characters get 12 feet away and suddenly they're doing the robot. Right, so you explore the school for a bit, pay almost $1,000 for an egg sandwich, talk about a cost of living crisis, and also learn about this game's gimmick, because what would a modern Pokemon game be without a generational gimmick? We've had Mega Evolutions, Z-moves, Gigantamaxing, and so this time we have it turns the Pokemon Crystal and shoves a chandelier on their head. Wow. I look forward to next generation's gimmick, Kentucky Friesing, which deep fries your Pokemon. And so, with all the tutorials done, the game opens up. That's right, welcome to the first truly open world Pokemon game. Remember how in Breath of the Wild, after you've explored the Great Plateau, the game just opens up and goes, alright, here's the main objective, now get there however you want. You get a very similar moment in Scarlet and Violet. But that got me thinking, what are the main objectives in a Pokemon game? Well, to answer that, let's go back to the originals. Most people would probably say it's completing the Pokédex. Okay, kind of, but let's be honest, that was always more of an optional objective. You can get to the end credits without completing the Dex, and with the whole Dexed controversy, what does completing a Pokédex in a modern Pokemon game even mean? So that leaves us with the other main objective, the Pokemon League. You defeat 8 gym leaders and challenge the Elite Four to become the Pokemon Champion. Well, this is still a major part of Scarlet and Violet. Only this time there's no sequence of routes taking you from one gym to the next. You can start wherever you like, and if one of the gyms is too tough, then try another one. The game does hold your hand a little, so you generally have a rough idea of which gym to tackle first. It's funny because you kind of have that in the Gen 1 games. Yes, there's a sequence of gym leaders on your card, but after a certain point you can challenge them in whatever order you'd like, which is how I ended up completely screwing up my Pokemon Blue retrospective. Check out the video here. The gym leaders are your usual bunch of eccentric characters, from a fourth wall breaking game streamer, to a middle-aged rapper lady, to this very tired looking office worker. This guy's my favorite. To me, he represents the millennial Pokemon fans, drained, tired, beaten down by life, and still clinging on to the franchises we grew up with. I've got to say though, these wacky gym leaders combined with the crystallizing gimmick and the questionable modern Pokemon designs can make the game feel like a fever trip. Hello, I'd like to challenge the gym leader please.
A few moments later.
What the hell is going on? This middle-aged lady's rapping in the snow, this hideous blue bird is dancing with a chandelier on its head, and there's an emo pig just standing there. Now, another deviation from the classic formula are the gym tests. In the old games, you had to grind your way through a bunch of trainers and an occasional puzzle to get to the gym leader. This has now been replaced with a unique minigame for each of the gyms, and to be honest, I found most of them to be a bit tedious. Like this one where you have to punt a giant Senzu beam. Of course, collecting all 8 badges leads to the Elite Four. I'm not going to spoil this section, just know that it's very similar to the classic games. Okay, so the Pokemon League is the main campaign, but the classic games always had a B-plot where you had to stop an evil organization from doing evil stuff. Well, Scarlet and Violet implement this element as a second independent thread. Just like the gyms, the sub-leaders of Team Star are spread around the region, allowing you to infiltrate their bases in whichever order you like. Now, I always found these sections tedious in the old games, because they always consisted of you having to grind through level after level of the organization's headquarters, taking on waves of generic grunts. Luckily, Scarlet and Violet does away with that. Instead, they utilize the walk-along auto-battle mechanic to have you and 3 of your Pokemon bulldoze your way through the base, annihilating every Pokemon in your path. Once that's done, you battle against one of the sub-leaders, who are on top of a Mad Max truck. Wait, what? I've got to fight the truck too? Is it a Pokemon, or are we just taking on vehicles now? If that's the case, then where's the Lexus from Street Fighter 2? Now, overall, I found this to be a fresh take on the old evil organization formula, and Team Star have a slightly deeper backstory and more nuanced character motivations than the classic world domination we get from the likes of Team Rocket. Alright, so we have the primary and secondary campaigns. Each have been adapted into an independent open world setting. So that's it, right? Not quite, because there's still one more story thread in Scarlet and Violet. This one combines a few of the leftover aspects from the classic games. Now, how the hell do they build a story around these unrelated elements, you may ask? Well, without diving into heavy spoilers, it revolves around the Pokemon you see on the cover. You know, the ones that look like toothless, unlocked a bike. This is a special legendary Pokemon which you can ride. And this story thread revolves around you and this George Michael lookalike traveling to locations around the map and battling these overgrown boss Pokemon who are guarding these herbs growing inside caves. I'm not making this up. George then mixes the herbs into a foot-long sub which, when fed to Toothless, unlocks extra abilities like swimming, dashing, and flying. Now, it may be hard to believe, but this thread actually ends up having the deepest story in the game as you get to learn more about this guy's backstory and motivation. And so, these are the three main story threads in Scarlet and Violet. Now, they may seem quite independent at first, but once you finish all three, they dovetail together into the endgame sequence, which is a bit slow and boring for my liking, to be honest. But I do appreciate the effort Game Freak put into beefing up the narrative when compared to the older entries. It's clear the developers took some serious steps towards bringing the franchise up to modern standards, and I think, for the most part, they did a good job. Suddenly, Legends Arceus makes sense. It was a beta test for these games. Well, we still had to pay full price for it, but you get the point. And the modernization of Pokemon go beyond the gameplay. This is very much a game of its time, with streamers, selfies, designer bags, and an end credit song by Ed Sheeran. I mean, it's alright, but let's be honest, it's no poker rap, is it? But it's not all great. Unfortunately, even the Daft Punk helmets can't help fix the rough, unpolished feeling that's plagued every modern Pokemon game. But that is what happens when you have a team of only about 150 people working on the world's most profitable franchise with annual installments. You get terrible popping, a region filled with clones doing the robot, and the frame rate dropping to PowerPoint levels whenever there are more than 4 Pokemon on screen. Not to mention that, in order to make way for the open world setting, the developers had to cut corners in other places, like character interactions and most buildings having no interiors. Look, as much as I like the battles being set in the open world, you will occasionally get an NPC character just walking through them. Now, I'm not going to dive into the battle mechanics and all the nuances of type balancing and the metagame because, well, I've always been terrible at it, and there are channels who will do a much better job. And speaking of being superficial, I personally think the new designs are a bit questionable. I'm not sure what I did in a previous life to deserve this as my final water starter evolution, but it must have been pretty terrible. Oh cool, a crate, just like Zelda. Wait, what? It's a Pokemon? Which looks like the Reddit logo? This is one weird Dune sequel. Wait, is that Dr. Seuss? Well, shit, I've got to catch him now. And so it's time to answer the question, how do Scarlet and Violet compare to the classic games? Well, it's clear that Game Freak's goal was to take essential elements from the classic Pokemon formula and adapt it to the open world game. And I think that, for the most part, these games did succeed in modernizing the franchise while still retaining elements that make it quintessentially Pokemon. Unfortunately, this is no Breath of the Wild. Scarlet and Violet can be a choppy, buggy mess, but I have a feeling that a lot of us will be willing to overlook the issues because this is the first time the games have lived up to what we imagined they could be 25 years ago. Except now, everyone's doing the robot. But what do you guys think? Is this the right direction for the franchise? Do you think that Game Freak struck a good mix of old and new? I'd be really interested to know your thoughts in the comments. Also, I'm kind of testing a new format, so if you'd like to see me compare more modern franchise entries to their classic counterparts, then please let me know in the comments also. As always, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow me on Twitter. See you next time.